Okay, we are on Daf Pei with beis in the very top line, and we're speaking about the distinctive quality of a person who is a Baal Asik. He is somewhat outside of the immediate area of Torah and Tefillah, and the distinctive preciousness of his service of Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe continues, and he says that on the contrary, regarding him, does it say that I have kissed him with kisses? That is an attachment of spirit to spirit, just like it is an ultimate illustration of affection when a person kisses more than when they express even words of love. Similarly, the davening of the person who is otherwise engaged in material affairs, the Baal Asik, the business person, which requires a greater level of Iskafya, of resistance, draws out a greater light from the darkness, and it thus evokes and draws it down from a far greater level. That this revelation is comparable to the quality of the kisses, which is that when a person feels such a great level of love that he can't express it in words, instead he expresses it through the act of kissing his beloved. And this is the idea that we said in the pasuk from Shir Hashirim, that you are like my brother, that we nurse from the same mother, that is, that our nursing is from the same origin, that is from Torah, which is the quality of Chochmah, the wisdom of Hashem, and Binah, the analysis, which are called father and mother. However, through Iskafya, resistance to temptation, and putting aside my own concerns, into nothingness, this is particularly an opportunity for the person who's engaged in the business world. He dispatches a level of godliness, so such a lofty level that he draws down this Yayin, this unknowable, which is the source of Torah. Like the pasuk tells us that Chochmah comes from Yayin, from a place of not knowing. That's where the revelation comes. And if so, then he is like my brother. That is, that we receive, just like two brothers came from the same parents, so too he comes from the same source. That the source is the loftiest of levels, that is, in the metaphor, that they nurse from the mother, which is the quality of Kesser, the crown that sits on top of the head, thus on top of the Chochmah and the Binah. And that's why Zvulun, who was the merchant, is mentioned before his older brother, the scholar Yisachar. And this is what it means when it says that Lavan kissed his grandchildren. This is a reference to the tribes who were called children to Loivain, not just Laban, their mother's father, but that quality of pure whiteness, because grandchildren, again, can be referred to as children or as brothers when they are the product of the same source, the source of Chochmah and Binah, that are called parents. We find also a similar idea explained in the Pardes and so on. And this is the next pasuk in Shir Hashirim that says, I will direct them and bring them to the house of my mother, which is a reference to Torah, because the Baal Asik, the person who is otherwise engaged in business, has to fix times for Torah, that even though he primarily is engaged in the physical world, where he is continuously resisting temptation and bringing forth parnasa to give tzedakah, he still has to bring down godliness in the process that it first comes through his thoughts, then his speech, and then his action. And his thoughts and his speech are shaped by fixing times of Torah study. And again, this is the primary time when we have this level of affection that is comparable to kissing, like it's explained in Tanya. And therefore, a person who is a Torah scholar, that is, he spends all his time studying Torah, he is referred to as the one who suckles from the mother, which is something that is constant, like a child is constantly with his mother, because he is, in fact, engaged in Torah day and night. And the Baal Asik, the person who's engaged in business, he has time that he sets aside for Torah, which is, as the next pasuk in Shir Hashirim says, we are directed and brought into the house of my mother. That is, he is directed away in a place that is not ordinarily where he goes, and he draws down from this loftiest of levels. And this is what it means, that it is taught, it is brought down to him in a level that he receives, like the words that I place in your mouth. And then the pasuk continues and it says, I will drink from spiced wine, and the wine that is brings him the joy, like we know the wine of Torah, that you squeeze the concept in Torah, you get the wine, which is the analysis, the understanding that is found in the oral Torah. And that's what makes Hashem happy, because Hashem is the characteristic of tzimtzum, even though there's concealment and it's hidden. And through drawing it down in Binah, he brings to this great simcha, a revelation of that which is hidden, that does not conceal. And this is what it means that he drinks from this wine, that the spiced wine has a beautiful fragrance, because the fragrance comes from the loftiest of levels, just like the fragrance sort of surrounds, makif, this idea of the food. There's the pleasure of the food's taste, and there's also the pleasure of the food's aroma. Even though the taste, the food, the nourishment satiates the body, and it's the aroma that gives the benefit sort of to the neshama, because it is a loftier level of pleasure that cannot be captured in something specific. You cannot bottle it. Now, this is the additional virtue of the establishment of Torah study times of a person who's otherwise engaged in business. That is, it's a greater level of Iskafya, of resistance of his ordinary demands, more than the person who is fully engaged in Torah study. Because he's engaged in Torah, his Torah is called the spiced wine, that this fragrance is specifically from something that is flavored, that the wine itself comes from the essence, just like wine comes from the essence of the grapes, and it also has this aroma. And a person who can't learn it all, and he establishes some time, is also referred to, as the pasuk says, from the juice of the pomegranates. What is the specific metaphor of the pasuk? Again, in Shir Hashir in chapter 8, of the juice of the pomegranate. But like we are told, that even the emptiest of Jews is as filled with mitzvahs as a pomegranate is filled with seeds. Because when we say the emptiest, we don't mean that they are rebellious, God forbid. It's just that they haven't studied Torah. And yet they are as filled with mitzvahs and good character, derech eretz, as a pomegranate is filled with seeds. Now, the mitzvahs will stimulate a level of godliness, excuse me, that brings down this great lofty level of godliness. Like we know, the garment's aroma is the ultimate illustration of Hashem's goal. And therefore, it is called the juice of the pomegranates, because it settles the soul. And that's why on the garment of the Kohen Gadol, there were pomegranate-shaped designs, tassels, to illustrate this idea. That concludes this mimer. Now, on the top left-hand side of this daf pei, we have an explanation. We say that all of his people are tzaddikim. Now, Yosef is called the higher tzaddik, and his brother Binyamin is called the lower tzaddik. There are neshamas that come from Yosef, and there are neshamas that are more like Binyamin. And yet, all of them are tzaddikim. The higher tzaddik is the one who connects Atzilus, the loftiest level of awareness, the most profound level of awareness, down with Bria, those levels that are less naturally aware of Hashem. And it's all Hashem in the heavens and the earth. Because Yaakov is that consistency that traverses from top to bottom, from end to end, that is a drawing down of the infinite light of Hashem from its source all the way down to the most ordinary, like Yaakov, which is all of the midas. And similarly, the midas are drawn down, that when a person has a love for something, he's drawn to it. And these are the offspring of Yaakov, the quality of Yosef, which is the level of Yesod, the basic connection of the giver with the recipient. And that's the level of the higher tzaddik, the tzaddik Yayin. And in order that the recipient should be able to absorb this gift, there has to be a connection in the avodah Hashem in a total surrender of self, mesiras nefesh. And that's the level of Binyamin, the lower tzaddik, who connects Bria, the world, or the less evidently godly stages of awareness, to the greater stages. That is the movement from the presumption of self to the presumption of godliness, from below to above. And therefore, when Binyamin was born, that birth is described as being very difficult. We know that Rachel Imenu died in that birth, because Binyamin is the co-joining of Bittul from the worlds of awareness of self, Bria Tzir Nasiya, to a stage of awareness of only Hashem, of Atzilus, which is sort of the opposite of birth, the opposite of revelation. Now, in physical mitzvahs, there are also these two levels. There are mitzvahs which draw down a light from above to below, like blowing the shofar, shaking the lulav, sukkah, tzitzis, tefillin. And then there are mitzvahs where we bring something from below to above, like the karbanos, the giving of the first shearings. And this is what we mean when we say, V'rav shalom b'nayach, that shalom, peace, is the connection between the giver and the recipient. There are two aspects of shalom. There's a shalom from above to below, that's through Yosef, and from below to above, and that's Binyamin. The quality of Yosef is called V'rav shalom, abundant peace. And this is the idea of the two kruvim from each end, the level of Yosef that draws from above to below. And Yosef is described as a young boy, because those are the kruvim which are described as young children. And one on one side is the quality of Binyamin, which is the connection of the recipient to the benefactor from above. And each one turns to the other, and the two join together. When the beis was destroyed, the Jewish people said, again, this quote from Shir HaShirim, who will be to us like a brother? That is, that we nursed from the same mother. That is the oral Torah, as we explained. And this is through the neshamas that are rooted in the level of Yosef, the higher level tzaddik, the tzaddik Yayin, that are called like brothers to Hashem. Now, this drawing down is primarily into the physical world. That since the drawing down of godliness into this world is through our intellect and through our speaking the words of Torah, in order that it should even be manifest on that which is outside. And again, that's the reference to the person who's primarily involved in business activities. And that's from the neshama that are Binyamin-like, that they are mostly involved in the material, and thus in giving tzedakah and doing acts of kindness and resisting temptation. New paragraph. Now it says that he kisses him with the kisses of his mouth. That is this union that is beyond anything you can describe. That just like a person physically kisses somebody because they have a great love for them, and that love cannot be captured in words because words are still going to be limited and not able to capture the full-on intensity of true love, so too, that which is drawn down through the fulfillment of mitzvah actions of the neshama that come from the quality of Binyamin, draw down from a level that is called a circle. There's no noticeable beginning or end. There is no beginning and end. It's all tied together. That is, that through elevating the quality of Binyamin, that is, but we work through the clutter of the oppositional quality of Gashmias in this world. And there we find a godliness that we can encase within the physical world, even though it was scattered through the process of the overwhelming of creation that led to the shattering of the vessels. And through such a birur, such an identification of godliness, we are able to reach this level that is comparable to the level called the kisses. That concludes the page. We now go on to the next page, page Pei Aleph. And this is what we mean when we say, I will direct him and I will bring him to the house of my mother. For here there is a drawing down from the loftiest of levels called the spiritual level or supernal level of mother, and then it becomes invested in literal mother. Or earlier we said that he nurses from the mother. And here we say that we will teach him, that he will become a recipient of that which is given. He's not like a brother, he's not an equal, he's a recipient. Because from such a lofty level, you can't be anything other than a recipient. You can't be a partner or brother, because it's my words, Hashem's words, that I place in your mouth. And the idea of the spiced wine, which is the next pasuk in Shir HaShirim, is, like it says in the Gemara, that there are 13 rivers that are allude to the 13 qualities of the beard that draw down from the loftiest levels. Like the beard draws down from the head. Nevertheless, when we say oil, we mean the quality of Chochmah. And spiced oil or fragrant oil has this beautiful aroma, which is again a quality that surrounds it, like the quality of Kesser that surrounds the Chochmah, as opposed to simply rigid scientific data. Similarly with wine, because when we say wine, we mean Binah. But when we say spiced wine, that it has a beautiful aroma, this is a revelation of a level of connection of Tainug that comes from the level of At. And this is drawn down through the resistance of worldly concerns and demands by fixing times of Torah study for the person who's involved in business. That concludes this mimer for the Parsha. And now there is an explanation about the idea of the kruvim, which we alluded to, that's taken from the Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe's father. It says that the feminine is a reference to the Jewish people who stand face to face with the quality of Zah, and they are on equal footing, and they receive even from the intellect of Ava'im, and even from the same crown that surpasses the intellect, like a crown that sits on the head. And in that circumstance, they can be referred to, when they receive Torah that comes from the Chochmah and Binah, they become partners or brothers, face to face. Now in Atzilus, we call it a great man and a great face, that the infinite light of Hashem is invested in defined vessels. And that we say it's all the same, what Hashem and what he brings about are all one. And through the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash, where Hashem compresses himself to exist, so to speak, between the poles of the ark from whence he will speak to Moshe Rabbeinu, then he is called the small face. And those are where the kruvim are. And since this physical world elevates itself 3 times during the daily davening, we elevate ourselves to a spiritual awareness. Therefore, that is manifest and it is realized in the kruvim who spread their wings above to the highest level. Like we know that the short face, which is the 6 internal midas, is the whole purpose of why God comes down into this world, in order to then radiate godly light in this physical world, even in the world of Bria, even the world of Yetzirah, and most notably, and most difficultly, in the world of Asiya. Through the recipients, which is us, called the feminine quality, which is the source of Biyah that receives from Atzilus, like the feminine receives from the masculine. And therefore it says that there was a cherub on one side and a cherub on the other side, the infinite light of Zah. And the cherub on one side is the source of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. And they are rooted in Atzilus that becomes invested within them. That is the infinite light of Hashem that comes to us through our capacity to grasp godliness with our intellect, beginning with our imagination. And this grants it from the feminine side through Zah, that it goes from stage to stage, not just an investiture, but the way it is in time. It's not the same in its up in its standing, but it is sort of pointed down here to this world. And the kruvim are made from one piece of metal that on top of the covering of the ark, which is the Kesser, the crown for both of them. And this quality of makif that surrounds the tablets that are in the ark, which is the masculine side, the gift from Hashem that is invested in this physical world, in time and in place, in the Beis Hamikdash. And at the time when the kruvim are elevated on high, and the kapoires and the luchais to Atzilus. And that's why they are described as spreading their wings over the cover of the luchais. And after the Churban, they are dispatched from Atzilus to their place, and they do not return into this physical world. Even in the second Beis Hamikdash, they were hidden. But what does return is the pnimius concept through our engagement in Torah study. And we study the teachings of the authors of the Mishnah in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, and subsequently there from the halachas, which are ultimately the expression of God's will. That was not revealed just in the written Torah. As we know, the idea that eshakcha, the righteous woman, is the crown of her husband, the woman being a reference to the oral Torah, which fleshes out the written Torah, just as in the development of a child, the feminine develops the contribution of the masculine. This ends the mimer on Parshas Truma.